Have you ever witnessed a moment so unjust that your blood boiled in an instant, only to see fate deliver a surprising twist? Picture a bustling airport security line, tensions high as a young black student is mocked by uniformed guards who dismiss her dreams and belittle her confidence. The stifling smell of disinfectant, the echo of scornful laughter, it all hangs in the air like a storm cloud. But then, like a flash of lightning, a powerful force enters the scene, her distinguished professor stepping out of the first-class lounge. What happens next will shake everyone to their core, and no one walks away unchanged. Ebony Garner had never felt more excited or terrified in her 18 years of life. She was clutching her acceptance letter to the National Collegiate Innovators Expo in Los Angeles, something she had earned after years of passion and endless nights immersed in her advanced robotics project. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood of Detroit, Ebony had learned to persevere from an early age. While some of her friends spent their weekends hanging out or partying, Ebony would hole up in the local library or bury herself in the small makeshift lab she had set up in her parents' garage. Her mother, Karen Garner, was a nurse working double shifts at the local hospital. Her father, Ronald, had lost his job at an automotive factory 2 years earlier and had to work part-time gigs just to keep the family afloat. Money was tight, so Ebony's acceptance to the expo felt like a dream come true, but it was also a logistical nightmare. She had scraped together her savings from after-school jobs, her parents pitched in what they could, and a local non-profit had awarded her a small travel scholarship. It was enough to cover her flight, a few nights in a budget hotel, and the modest conference fee. As Ebony packed her worn black suitcase, her heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and nerves. She would be presenting her senior year project, an affordable prosthetic hand designed from recycled materials. The device was not only cost-effective, it was built with a modular approach so that children who outgrew one size could easily replace the smaller parts without buying a whole new prosthesis. She had shown this invention to her high school science teacher and then to one of her local mentors, Professor Cassandra Henderson from Wayne State University. The professor was so impressed, she invited Ebony to continue refining the project in her university lab over the summer. "Don't forget to call me as soon as you land," her mother instructed that morning, zipping up Ebony's jacket. Karen's eyes glistened with maternal pride. "And make sure you keep your ID safe at all times." "Yes, Mum," Ebony replied, unable to hide the small tremor in her voice. She was excited, yes, but there was a nagging sense of worry. Traveling alone for the first time, heading across the country for an event where she'd be one of the youngest, and based on what she'd seen in past participant lists, one of the few black female innovators. But Ebony had come too far to let fear stop her. She had dreams bigger than her pocket could handle, dreams that demanded courage. Her father squeezed her hand. "We're proud of you, Bean," he said, using her childhood nickname. "You've worked so hard for this. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She nodded, inhaling deeply. "Thank you both. I won't let you down." Professor Henderson, a tall, poised African-American woman in her early 50s, had told Ebony she would be on the same American Airlines flight out of Detroit Metropolitan Airport. The professor, however, was flying first class thanks to university funding and her own frequent flyer status. She promised Ebony that if anything went awry, Ebony should text or call her immediately. That morning, Ebony made her way through the airport. She wore her best pair of jeans, a comfortable sweater, and brand new sneakers. Everything about that day had felt surreal, as though she was stepping onto a bigger stage in life. A swirl of passengers moved around her business travelers with laptops, families wrangling children, individuals lugging carry-ons with a sense of worldly poise. Ebony clutched her backpack more tightly. It carried her greatest treasure, the laptop and prototypes for her project. If she lost them, years of work would vanish in an instant. She had also included her ID and all her documents in a zippered pouch in the front pocket of the backpack, just as her mother instructed. What she did not expect was the confrontation waiting for her at the security checkpoint. At the TSA line, Ebony tried to exude calm, but each step forward felt like walking into an unknown territory. The overhead lights were harsh, the line was moving slowly, and the sound of bins shuffling and shoes squeaking against the floor seemed louder than usual. A wave of anxiety rippled through her stomach as the uniformed security officers directed passengers left and right. Eventually, Ebony approached the podium where an officer in a navy blue TSA uniform stood scanning boarding passes and identification. The name on the officer's badge read D. Perry. He was a tall man, probably in his mid-30s, with a bored look on his face. "Boarding pass and ID," he said, flatly, barely looking at her. She handed them over with both hands as she'd been taught. "Here you go, sir." He took a cursory glance at her documents, then frowned. "This your real ID? Kinda young to be traveling alone, ain't you?" Ebony felt a tightening in her chest. "Yes, sir. It's real. I'm traveling for a conference in Los Angeles." D. Perry raised an eyebrow. "Conference, huh? Let me call a friend over." He motioned to another officer, a woman named F. Harris, with braided hair coiled tightly into a bun. Ebony felt a sudden flush of fear. She had done nothing wrong. Why were they calling over another officer? "She claims she's going to some conference," Perry said. "You ever heard of a high school kid heading to a big conference in LA? Because I haven't." The second officer smirked. "Unusual for sure. Let's see that ID." She peered closely at Ebony's driver's license, then at Ebony herself. "You got any other form of ID? This is the only one I have," Ebony said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I'm a student. This is all they require." Harris handed the ID back to Perry. Ignoring Ebony for a moment, the pair exchanged a glance that made Ebony feel as though she were an insect under a microscope. They did not bother lowering their voices. "You see this? The license is brand new," Harris commented loudly. "Look at the edges. Kinda suspect." Perry nodded. "Might be fake. She could be some runaway or something. Or maybe she's trying to smuggle something." Ebony's cheeks burned. She opened her mouth to protest, but her words stuck in her throat. She didn't want to escalate the situation, knowing all too well that certain interactions could easily take a wrong turn. Years of hearing stories about racial profiling ran through her mind. She could almost hear her mother's cautionary voice. "Stay calm, stay respectful, keep your head down." "Why are you acting so nervous?" Perry snapped, noticing Ebony's trembling hands. She swallowed. I'm not trying to act nervous," she replied quietly. "This is just my first time traveling alone. My professor is—" But Harris cut her off. "Ma'am, step aside. We need to ask you some additional questions." Ebony's heart hammered. "Yes, ma'am," she said, stepping to a table off to the side. She could feel the eyes of other travelers flicking in her direction, some with curiosity, others with pity, but none daring to intervene. The next few minutes were humiliating. Harris and Perry began to ask Ebony about her background, why she was traveling, what her parents did, and how she afforded the ticket. Ebony explained as best she could the scholarship, her project, the expo, but her explanation only earned scoffs. "You have some fancy conference paying for everything, but you're a high school student from Detroit. That's mighty convenient, Harris said, crossing her arms. It's not paying for everything, Ebony corrected, wincing at how her voice sounded too meek, even to her own ears. I had to work to earn money, and my parents helped. Work doing what babysitting? Perry joked, prompting a short laugh from Harris. Ebony's humiliation coursed through her like a flash flood, swift and stinging. She could feel tears threatening to escape, but she forced them back. Crying in front of these people would only confirm their belief that she was weak or lying or both. She mentally recited the steps of her invention. To distract herself, servo motor connects to microcontroller. The custom gear mechanism allows for grip adjustments. A line of passengers waiting for additional screening began forming. Some gave Ebony sympathetic looks, but the officers continued oblivious or uncaring about the scene they were causing. "All right," Ms. Garner Perry finally said, as if he were doing her a favor. "Let's just see if your belongings check out. If they do, you can go. But let's not have any more attitude." "Got it?" Ebony nodded, biting her tongue. Another half-hour passed with Ebony being pulled from line to line, undergoing a pat-down, having her bag rummaged through in plain view of everyone else. The laughter from a few TSA staffers in the background grated on her. She caught words like "kid," probably lying this generation, floating in the air. Finally, after finding nothing suspicious in Ebony's belongings, the officers let her go, with a curt, "Have a nice day." By that point, Ebony was dangerously close to missing her flight. Frantic and shaken, she scrambled to the concourse, ignoring her parched throat and pounding head. She had no idea that fate was about to shift in her favor because someone else was about to enter the picture. Ebony arrived at gate A46, breathless tears clouding her eyes. The gate area was already bustling with people, and she could see on the display board that her flight was boarding in 10 minutes. She headed straight to the gate desk to verify that she was still on time. A gate agent, with a practiced smile, confirmed her seat and told her she was in Zone 3 boarding. Ebony nodded relief, flooding her system. She wasn't going to miss her flight after all. Yet the sting of the humiliating ordeal lingered. She found a seat and texted her mother, "Made it to the gate. Rough security check, but I'm okay, love you." While waiting, Ebony began rearranging her backpack, making sure her ID and boarding pass were now tucked deep inside an internal pocket. She never wanted to feel that vulnerable again. Ebony. She looked up to see Professor Cassandra Henderson approaching, a carry-on suitcase trailing behind her. The professor wore a tailored gray suit and carried an air of quiet confidence. Ebony exhaled a shaky breath, feeling both relief and the urge to cry. She stood, trying to straighten her posture. "Professor Henderson," she greeted, forcing a smile. I'm glad to see you." The older woman's eyes narrowed as she took in Ebony's trembling hands and reddened eyes. "What happened?" Ebony tried to wave it off. "Security gave me a hard time. I guess they thought I didn't look like I belonged." The professor's gaze hardened. "Did they harass you?" she asked quietly, though her voice dripped with controlled anger. Ebony shrugged, tears threatening to fall again. "They questioned my ID and made me go through extra screening. They kept laughing and implying I was lying about why I'm traveling. It took forever." Professor Henderson's jaw tightened. "I see. Did you get names?" Ebony hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, D. Perry and F. Harris." She paused, her voice still shaky. "I'm just glad they finally let me go." Something flashed in the professor's eyes. Fury combined with a fierce protectiveness. "I can't believe this," she murmured. "Well, we'll address it later. For now, let's get on the plane. Let me upgrade you to my row if there's an open seat in first class. There might be a last-minute seat I can get you with my miles. You shouldn't have to worry about anything else." "No, it's okay," Ebony insisted, though her heart soared at the thought of riding in first class. But guilt ate at her too. She didn't want to inconvenience the professor. "I don't want you to use your miles on me." The professor gently touched Ebony's shoulder. "Nonsense. Consider it a small reward for dealing with that nonsense at security. And trust me, Ebony, you and I are going to talk to management about this, but let's do it properly. I have some connections through the university. For now, breathe. We need you in top form for your presentation." Ebony nodded, a timid smile creeping up despite her ragged emotions. The professor gave her a quick pat on the back before heading to the gate desk. Ebony watched as she spoke to the agent, exchanged a few words, and handed over her frequent flyer membership card. Within moments, the agent was tapping away on her computer with a polite smile. It struck Ebony that this was the first time in her life someone outside her family had stood up for her like this. That realization stirred feelings of gratitude and relief in her chest. By the time Professor Henderson returned, Ebony felt her tears had dried, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. "Good news," the professor said, holding out a newly printed boarding pass. "Seat 2A. You'll be sitting right behind me. First class all the way." Ebony's eyes went wide. She clutched the boarding pass as though it were made of delicate gold leaf. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking with gratitude. I don't even know what to say." A soft smile curved the professor's lips. "Just pay it forward one day, Ebony. That's how we lift each other up. Now let's line up." They're calling first class to board. As Ebony followed her mentor to the front of the boarding line, she felt a cacophony of emotions swirling in her gut: relief, anxiety, anger, gratitude, and a strange sense of vindication. She replayed the humiliating scene at security, wishing she could have had the professor there by her side. But there would be other battles, and Ebony had the sense that she wouldn't be fighting them alone. She caught sight of a uniformed crew member scanning boarding passes, another reminder of how official everything was. Soon, Ebony was walking down the jet bridge, heart pounding. She clutched her backpack, which contained her entire future in the form of her research, and breathed in the recycled airplane air as she stepped on board. Little did she know, the real drama was yet to unfold in the skies above, and once they landed in Los Angeles. Ebony had never in her life seen the inside of a first-class cabin. The seats were wide and plush, arranged in pairs with ample legroom. The overhead bins were spacious, and the flight attendants moved with an air of practiced attentiveness. As Ebony found her seat 2A, she felt like she had stepped onto a private island of luxury. Professor Henderson was right next to her in 1A. She turned around, gave Ebony an encouraging nod, and said, "Make yourself comfortable. They usually serve a pre-departure beverage. Try some orange juice or maybe sparkling water to calm your nerves." Ebony smiled tentatively. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you again. I really appreciate this." A flight attendant with a name tag that read R. Thompson approached beaming. "Welcome aboard," he said, his voice smooth and professional. "May I offer you a beverage before takeoff?" Ebony blinked. "Orange juice, please," she managed. She tried to bury the lingering humiliation from the TSA encounter and focus on how fortunate she was now. She told herself she would not let negativity overshadow her accomplishment. She was on her way to present her invention, a moment she had dreamed of for years. The flight attendant returned with a glass of juice on a small tray. Ebony thanked him, then glanced out the window. In the distance, she could see baggage trucks whirring about and planes taxiing to runways. It was a large, busy world out there, and she was about to be part of it. "Everything okay?" Professor Henderson asked from the row in front. Ebony leaned forward. "I'm still a little shaken, but I'm okay, thanks to you." The professor reached back lightly, squeezing Ebony's hand. "You belong here, Ebony. Don't ever forget that." Warmth flooded Ebony's chest. She sipped her juice, taking a moment to breathe. The cabin began filling with other first-class passengers. Ebony caught snippets of conversations, two businessmen discussing stock prices, a middle-aged woman complaining to her husband about the dryness of airplane cabins. No one seemed to bat an eye at Ebony. She was just another passenger. But Ebony couldn't shake the feeling that the TSA incident was a precursor to something else, that the day's tension had only begun to unravel. And indeed, a confrontation was brewing just a few rows away. Ebony noticed a commotion at the front door of the aircraft. Two uniformed TSA officers stepped into the cabin, scanning the rows. Her stomach twisted. It was D. Perry and F. Harris, the same pair who had given her a nightmare at the security checkpoint. Her first thought was that they might be there for her. Maybe they had changed their minds or found some new reason to question her. Ebony felt panic rising, but she forced herself to remain seated. After all, she had done nothing wrong. Professor Henderson noticed them too. She turned around, her brow furrowed. "What are they doing here?" she whispered to Ebony. I don't know," Ebony replied, voice quivering. "Do you think?" Before she could finish, one of the officers, Harris, pointed to a seat in row 5. A male passenger with a shaved head and dark sunglasses was rummaging through a briefcase. The man looked up, startled. Perry stepped forward and asked to see the man's ID. The passenger protested, "I already showed TSA my ID." "What's going on?" Some first-class passengers craned their necks to watch, while others huffed in annoyance. The flight attendant, R. Thompson, tried to intercede. "Officers, is there an issue?" Harris shot him a curt glare. "We have reason to believe this passenger may be carrying an unauthorized item." "Step aside." Another wave of relief and guilt washed through Ebony as she realized they weren't here for her. But that relief was tempered by an echo of her own experiences. She knew how humiliating it felt to be singled out without clear justification. She also couldn't help but wonder if this was truly about contraband, or if the TSA officers were on some power trip. The rest of the cabin waited, with bated breath, as the officers rummaged through the passenger's bag. They pulled out a small toiletry kit that apparently exceeded the liquid limit. The passenger argued that it was medically necessary. Harris insisted they needed further documentation. The argument escalated until the passenger was asked to deplane. A tense hush fell over the plane as the passenger reluctantly gathered his things and marched up the aisle, muttering curses under his breath. The flight attendants exchanged troubled looks. Officer Perry and Officer Harris shot Ebony a quick glance on their way out, as though reminding her of their presence. Then they disappeared. Ebony exhaled a breath she didn't realize she was holding. She turned to the professor, eyes wide. "That was intense," she whispered. The professor nodded, face tight. "Some officers let their power get to their heads. Unfortunately, this happens more often than we'd like." A few minutes later, the captain came on the PA system, announcing a short delay due to the security incident. Ebony and the professor exchanged knowing looks. The memory of Ebony's own ordeal still burned. But Ebony was thankful that at least she had a boarding pass with her name in first class. She clung to the small victory. When the plane finally pushed back from the gate, Ebony tried to focus on the bigger picture. She was heading to Los Angeles, to a future that she'd worked tirelessly to create. She looked out the window. As the plane taxied to the runway, the overhead lights dimming for takeoff. The adrenaline still coursed through her veins, but she let the rhythmic hum of the engines lull her into a calmer state. Little did she know that a twist of fate awaited her upon arrival, a twist that would not only vindicate her, but also show the world just how powerful her invention could be. Once the seatbelt sign was off and the plane reached cruising altitude, Ebony felt some of her tension drift away. A flight attendant passed through the cabin with a hot towel service, another first for Ebony, and she fumbled with how to use the steaming cloth. She noticed the other passengers calmly refreshing their faces and hands, so she followed suit, feeling an odd mix of self-consciousness and joy. Professor Henderson turned around in her seat, craning her neck to speak quietly. "How are you feeling?" Ebony offered a small shrug. "Better, I guess. Thank you for upgrading me. This is a completely new world for me." The professor smiled, then motioned for Ebony to walk up to the galley area so they could speak more privately. Ebony followed, intrigued. In the dimly lit aisle, with most passengers either watching their seatback entertainment or trying to nap, the professor leaned against a storage compartment. "I wanted to talk to you about the expo," the professor said in a low voice. "They're expecting a lot from you, Ebony. You know that, right?" Ebony nodded, heart pounding. "Yes, and I've prepared. I have my schematics, my prototypes, everything. I just hope I don't mess up." Professor Henderson's expression softened. "You won't. Your project is groundbreaking, Ebony, an affordable prosthetic that grows with the user. That's exactly the kind of innovation that can change lives, especially in underprivileged communities. And I believe the judges will see its value." Ebony felt a surge of pride. "I really want to help people who can't afford traditional prosthetics. They're so expensive and insurance doesn't always cover them, especially for kids. And you know, I also want to prove that I belong in the STEM world." "You do belong," the professor insisted. "You've worked hard for this." "But, Ebony, there might be some pushback." "Pushback?" Ebony echoed, frowning. "Sometimes larger corporations that manufacture prosthetics see projects like yours as a threat. They might dismiss it or question the quality. Don't let them intimidate you." Ebony nodded, remembering the times she had tried to contact major prosthetic companies for research data and been brushed off. It still amazed her that this high school project had garnered enough attention for her to be invited to a collegiate expo. "I won't let them scare me," Ebony said. Mustering confidence, she wasn't entirely sure she had. "Good," the professor said, smiling. She glanced down the aisle, noticing a flight attendant approaching with a beverage cart. "Let's go back to our seats. Stay focused, Ebony. After what happened today, I want you to use that frustration as fuel. Show them what you're made of." Ebony nodded, feeling a newfound determination. As they returned to their seats, Ebony reflected on how surreal her morning had been. She had been ridiculed by TSA, upgraded to first class, and now found herself discussing corporate pushback on her invention all in the span of a few hours. For the first time, Ebony allowed herself to imagine the future, if things went well, at the expo's scholarship opportunities, partnerships with universities, perhaps even winning an award that would help fund further development. She wondered if she might eventually patent her design. Before she could delve deeper into daydreams, she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. It was one of the flight attendants, a woman named Kay Reeves. "Miss, I saw you come on board with Professor Henderson," Reeves said, her tone polite. "I just wanted to let you know you're very lucky to have her mentorship. She's a big name in biomedical engineering." Ebony blinked, glancing at Professor Henderson's seat. The professor was reading a book, oblivious to their conversation. Ebony knew the professor taught mechanical engineering and had done significant research, but she hadn't realized she was that famous in the field. "Really?" Ebony asked softly. Reeves nodded. Absolutely. I have a friend who studies at Wayne State, and she speaks very highly of Dr. Henderson. She's published in a bunch of renowned journals. Anyway, I just wanted to say hi, and I hope you have a great flight. As Reeves walked away, Ebony felt her heart swell with gratitude. She had no idea that Professor Henderson's reputation reached even here at 35,000 feet. Once again, she marveled at how the professor had taken her under her wing. With renewed reverence, Ebony settled back into her seat, letting the hum of the plane cradle her thoughts. The first-class cabin felt like a different universe, one where Ebony could dare to dream and momentarily forget the stinging memory of security's laughter. Yet in her mind, she replayed the scornful voices of Perry and Harris. "You don't look like someone who could be going to a conference, probably lying." She vowed that if ever given the chance, she would stand up not just for herself, but for anyone else who faced that kind of dismissive prejudice. Little did she know that moment would come sooner than she thought. An hour into the flight, Ebony found herself drifting off to sleep. The gentle vibrations of the aircraft and the comfortable first-class seat were a world away from her cramped bedroom back home. She didn't realize how exhausted she was from the early morning, the adrenaline rush, and the emotional toll of being harassed. Just as she was about to fully slip into slumber, a jolt startled her awake. The seatbelt sign pinged on, and the plane shook with turbulence. Ebony clutched her armrests, eyes wide. She'd experienced mild turbulence before, but this felt sharper. The flight attendant's voice came over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign due to unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened until further notice." Ebony's heart thudded as the plane jolted again. She glanced at Professor Henderson, who was calmly turning off her overhead light and leaning back in her seatbelt secured. Seeing the professor so composed eased Ebony's panic a bit. Despite the turbulence, Ebony tried to quell her anxiety by reading over her presentation notes. She could recite them by heart, explaining how her prosthetics modular design could be assembled in under an hour, how each segment was 3D printed from biodegradable plastic, and how the entire cost was less than a tenth of a standard prosthetic hand. She mentally walked through her slides, imagining how she'd present them to a room full of potential investors, academics, and fellow innovators. Suddenly, the plane pitched in a more violent manner, eliciting gasps from several passengers. Overhead compartments rattled. A few stray items fell to the floor, including Ebony's notepad, which skittered down the aisle. She briefly considered getting up to retrieve it, but thought better of it. The flight attendants were strapped into their seats, and the seatbelt sign glowed ominously. As Ebony's pulse raced, she tried to distract herself by looking out the window, but all she saw were gray clouds swirling beneath them. Another jolt caused a beverage cup to tumble off a tray table across the aisle, splashing coffee onto the floor. This was definitely not your average turbulence. Her breath came faster. Every muscle in her body tensed. She recalled how people joked about plane crashes, and though she knew the statistics that flying was safer than driving, fear gnawed at her. She silently prayed for the turbulence to end. Minutes later, the captain's voice crackled overhead. "Folks, we're experiencing a bit of severe turbulence. Please remain calm. We're attempting to navigate to smoother air. Please keep your seatbelts fastened." Ebony closed her eyes and gripped the armrests, focusing on steadying her breathing. Inhale, exhale. The seat rocked beneath her, but slowly the plane seemed to level out. After what felt like an eternity, the turbulence subsided. When it was over, the passengers collectively exhaled. Ebony heard a few people laugh nervously, the typical release of tension after a stressful event. Flight attendants began moving through the cabin, checking on everyone. Someone passed Ebony's notepad back to her, and she thanked them. Could have been worse, Ebony murmured, half to herself. She noticed that Professor Henderson had turned around, checking if Ebony was okay. "You all right?" the professor asked softly. Ebony nodded, adrenaline still pulsing. "Just a little shaken, but I'm fine." The professor smiled, her eyes radiating reassurance. "Flying can be unpredictable, but we're in good hands. Try to relax." Ebony attempted to follow that advice. She couldn't help but wonder if the rest of the journey, both literal and metaphorical, would be filled with turbulence as well. But she resolved to push through. She had to. The expo meant everything to her, and she refused to let fear or prejudice stand in her way. The flight smoothed out for the next couple of hours, and Ebony drifted in and out of a light sleep. She dreamt fitfully of mechanical arms, rows of seats, and mocking laughter that morphed into applause. Eventually, she woke to the gentle overhead lighting, signaling that breakfast service would begin soon. As she rubbed her eyes, Ebony noticed a man seated across the aisle from her in 2C, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. He was older, maybe in his 50s or 60s, sporting salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He nodded politely when he saw Ebony stirring. "Good morning," he said quietly, mindful not to disturb other passengers. Ebony managed a tired smile. "Morning." She busied herself checking her phone to see if she had any messages. She didn't, of course, since they were still in flight mode, and then rummaged for her headphones to watch a movie. As she was untangling the cord, she felt a tap on her shoulder. "I couldn't help but overhear yesterday," the man in the suit said, keeping his voice low. "You're attending some sort of conference in Los Angeles. I heard you mention to the professor that you have a robotics project." Ebony blinked. She wasn't sure how much he had overheard or if he was just making conversation. "Yes," she said cautiously. "It's an innovation expo. I'm presenting my prosthetic hand design." His eyes lit up with genuine interest. "Prosthetics, that's impressive. I'm Henry Clarkson. I work with the Clarkson Foundation, a philanthropic organization that funds medical research and humanitarian projects." Ebony's pulse kicked up a notch. That's amazing." "I'm Ebony Garner," she replied, extending a hand to shake. "I'm still in high school, but I've been researching prosthetic solutions for a while now." "High school?" Henry's brow lifted in amazement. "That's extraordinary. Have you partnered with any labs or corporations yet?" Ebony glanced at Professor Henderson, who was still sleeping. "I've done some work at Wayne State University under Professor Henderson's mentorship, but no corporate partners, not yet. I was hoping the expo might open some doors." Henry nodded thoughtfully. "Well, I might be able to help connect you with some folks who share your passion for affordable medical solutions. The Clarkson Foundation, for instance, has several initiatives that align with what you're doing." Ebony's mind whirled. A door was indeed opening, possibly bigger than she dared hope. "That would be, wow, that would be incredible," she said softly. "I can't believe this," he chuckled. "Sometimes fate puts us in the right place at the right time, Ms. Garner. If you have a business card, or at least your email address, I'd love to keep in touch." A pang of embarrassment hit Ebony. She didn't have business cards. "I don't have any cards on me," she admitted, "but I can jot down my email for you." "That'd be great," Henry said, offering her a small notepad and pen. "You know, the foundation works a lot with relief efforts in developing countries. An affordable prosthetic, especially one that can be easily adapted for kids, could change thousands, if not millions, of lives." As Ebony wrote down her email, her excitement soared. This random meeting on a plane could be the key to scaling her invention beyond her wildest dreams. She handed the notepad back to Henry, who placed it in his jacket pocket like it was something precious. "This might sound forward," Henry continued, "but if your presentation goes well, maybe we can schedule a meeting in LA with some of my associates. Or if you can't make it, then we can do a Zoom call once you're back home." "Thank you so much," Ebony breathed, practically giddy. "That sounds wonderful." Henry smiled and gave a small wave, indicating that she should feel free to get back to her own seat. Ebony sank into her seat, her mind reeling with possibilities. Had this really just happened? Professor Henderson stirred awake a few minutes later, and Ebony excitedly whispered the news to her. The professor's eyes widened, a proud smile forming. "That's fantastic," she said softly. "See, good things come to those who persevere. We'll see how this pans out." And in that moment, Ebony realized that life had a funny way of balancing tragedies and triumphs. For every TSA officer who doubted her, there was a philanthropic director who believed in her. For every door slammed, another one cracked open. She silently thanked whatever force of the universe had seated her next to Henry Clarkson. But Ebony also knew not to get ahead of herself. Los Angeles was still hours away, and who knew what other challenges awaited her? After the turbulence and the prospect of a new partnership, the rest of the flight was relatively uneventful. Ebony managed to catch a short nap, waking up just as the plane began its descent into Los Angeles. She peeked out the window, marveling at the sprawling cityscape below, the grid of streets, the palm trees, the distant hills. It was her first time on the West Coast, and an electric thrill buzzed through her veins. Professor Henderson gave Ebony a supportive smile. "Ready to dazzle them?" "I'm a little nervous," Ebony admitted, "but I'm ready." Henry Clarkson, in 2C, gave Ebony a parting nod. "Good luck, Ms. Garner. I'll be in touch." Ebony thanked him, feeling the weight of potential opportunities pressing on her mind. "Don't mess this up," she reminded herself. "People are noticing you now." When the seatbelt sign finally turned off and the cabin doors opened, Ebony grabbed her backpack and carefully checked that all her prototypes were intact. Then, following the slow shuffle of first-class passengers, she stepped onto the jet bridge, taking in her first breath of Los Angeles air, warm, dry, and tinged with the excitement of a city brimming with creative energy. Professor Henderson and Ebony made their way into the terminal aisles, scanning for signs pointing them to baggage claim. The swirl of travelers, the bright overhead lights, the eclectic shops, and the towering advertisements for movies and car brands made Ebony's head spin. They headed down an escalator to baggage claim. The hum of the conveyor belts and the echo of announcements welcomed them. Ebony was about to heave a sigh of relief she had made it here in one piece, when she spotted to her utter shock the familiar uniforms of TSA officers D. Perry and F. Harris yet again. Her stomach clenched. Why are they here? Had they followed her? That seemed unlikely. But Ebony felt a spike of anxiety nonetheless. She grabbed Professor Henderson's arm. "They're here," she whispered, eyes wide. The professor's gaze snapped toward the officers, her lips thinning. "What on earth?" She straightened her shoulders. "Stay calm, Ebony. We have nothing to hide." They continued to the baggage carousel, trying to act nonchalant. But Ebony could feel the security officer's eyes on them. Sure enough, within minutes, Perry and Harris approached. "Well, look who it is," Perry said with a smug grin. "Our little conference-goer." Ebony's face flushed. She clenched her jaw to keep herself from snapping back. Professor Henderson stepped in immediately. "Excuse me, officers. Is there a reason you're following my student?" Harris crossed her arms. "No one's following anybody," she replied in a tone thick with sarcasm. "We just happen to be here on official business. We have reason to believe there may be suspicious items traveling on this flight. This flight, the one we just arrived on from Detroit, Professor Henderson asked, eyebrows arching. That's quite a coincidence. Coincidence happens, Perry said, shrugging. We might need to check your bags again, Miss Garner. Ebony's hands tightened into fists around the handle of her carry-on. She felt her pulse spike. Why she managed to say, in a steady voice, "You already searched me thoroughly in Detroit." "There's new intel," Harris retorted. "Step aside. It'll just be a moment." A rush of anger flared in Ebony. She had done everything right. She had cooperated, followed every rule, endured their ridicule, and yet here they were, again trying to intimidate her. No more, she thought. Professor Henderson spoke up, her voice steely. "Officers, this is harassment. If you have legitimate cause, we'll comply. But otherwise, we'll be reporting you to the TSA and the airport authorities for targeting my student." Harris glared. "Legitimate cause. Don't you talk to me about legitimate cause. We have every right to search suspicious passengers." "Suspicious," Ebony echoed, struggling to keep her tone calm. "What makes me suspicious exactly?" "Let's not make a scene," Perry said, but his stance was hostile, a smirk still playing on his lips. By now, other passengers were watching, some pausing to see the confrontation. A couple of Ebony's fellow first-class travelers recognized her and whispered among themselves. Ebony's heart pounded. She could practically taste her own fury and humiliation. "Check our bags if you must," Professor Henderson said, "but rest assured I'll be filing a formal complaint. This is beyond reason." "Do you target all young black women traveling with academic equipment, or just the ones with bright futures?" Harris's eyes blazed, but she said nothing. Instead, she and Perry began rummaging through Ebony's carry-on, pulling out the prototype pieces wrapped in bubble wrap. They held them up, as though expecting them to be contraband. People around them murmured, and cameras flashed. Some bystanders were taking photos or videos of the spectacle. "This is a partial prosthetic," Ebony said, her voice strong, despite her trembling hands. "It's an invention. I'm here for an expo." A hush fell over the immediate area. The tension was palpable. Perry and Harris exchanged a glance, perhaps realizing there was nothing to find here again. Still, they took their time unfolding Ebony's clothes and rifling through her papers, apparently savoring the humiliation. Finally, they shoved everything back into Ebony's bag with little care, wrinkling clothes and nearly bending a crucial 3D printed part. "You can go," Perry said coldly. "Unbelievable," Professor Henderson muttered, zipping up Ebony's bag with shaking hands. A hush seemed to ripple through the onlookers, many of whom glared at the officers. Ebony's throat was tight, anger and embarrassment scorching her from the inside out. Yet a flicker of vindication sparked when she saw the disapproval in the eyes of so many around them. If Perry and Harris expected to degrade her into silence, they might have miscalculated. Still seething, Ebony and Professor Henderson collected their checked luggage from the carousel and walked away. Ebony's entire body trembled. She wanted to scream or cry, she wasn't sure which. But she held her head high, determined not to let them see her break. Not here, not now. Little did Ebony know that this very public incident was about to take on a life of its own on social media, igniting conversations she never expected, and leading to consequences that would stun everyone involved. By the time Ebony and Professor Henderson arrived at their modest hotel near downtown Los Angeles, Ebony was on the verge of an emotional meltdown. The second encounter with TSA had cut deep. She felt violated, humiliated, and angry. The professor tried to reassure her, but Ebony's mind was swirling with thoughts of injustice. Why me? She trudged into the hotel lobby, her arms aching from carrying her luggage, her spirit heavier than her bags. The professor handled the check-ins, securing 2 separate rooms. When Ebony finally stepped into her small, tidy room, she collapsed onto the bed, tears escaping at last. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. She saw a flurry of notifications, messages from unknown numbers, friend requests on social media tags on Twitter. Confused, she clicked on one of the Twitter mentions and her heart skipped a beat. Someone had recorded the entire incident at LAX on their phone. The video showed Perry and Harris rummaging through Ebony's belongings, Ebony's face a mask of anger and humiliation. More notably, voices in the background commented about racial profiling and unnecessary harassment. The tweet with the video had gone viral, racking up tens of thousands of views within hours. Ebony stared at the screen in disbelief. She saw her own face, her professor's protective stance, and the scowling faces of the officers. The caption read, "Young black student harassed by TSA at LAX. She's just trying to attend a science expo." "Oh my God," Ebony whispered, a mix of mortification and relief flooding through her. This was no longer a private humiliation. It was quickly becoming a public outcry. She scrolled through the comments at justice. "All this is outrageous. She's clearly a student with a project. TSA overreach again. Hash, stop. Racial profiling. STEM girls. Rock, she deserves better. Proud of her for standing her ground. Aviate flyer, unbelievable. Hope she gets a lawsuit going." Ali from Detroit. "Wait, is this Ebony Garner? She's a genius from my old high school. TSA messed with the wrong one." Ebony's eyes widened. She set the phone down, her pulse thundering. This was the last thing she'd expected. She wondered how the professor would react. Would she be upset that this had gone public, or would she use this as leverage to push for change? A soft knock on the adjoining door interrupted Ebony's thoughts. Professor Henderson stepped in, looking somber. "Ebony, have you seen Twitter?" Ebony nodded mutely, picking up her phone. The professor exhaled, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It's gone viral. I've been getting calls and texts from colleagues journalists. It's everywhere." A swirl of conflicting emotions hit Ebony's: shame at being the center of a scandal, fury at having her trauma amplified, yet also a strange sense of vindication. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. The professor reached out and placed a comforting hand on Ebony's shoulder. "We tell the truth. We'll talk to the press if necessary. We'll issue a statement about the harassment. The TSA has guidelines that strictly forbid profiling. It's time we hold these officers accountable." Ebony's mind spun. She'd never dealt with media attention before. "I just want to focus on my presentation," she admitted. "It's tomorrow morning." Professor Henderson gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "We will. And we'll also use this platform to highlight exactly the kind of prejudice young students of color face even when they're trying to bring positive innovations to society." Ebony nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "Okay, let's do it." The professor stood. "I'll handle any immediate media inquiries. You rest up. You need to be at the venue bright and early. This is your moment to shine, Ebony." With that, the professor left the room to make a flurry of calls. Ebony scrolled through more tweets, her emotional pendulum swinging from indignation to empowerment. She realized that, ironically, the humiliating incident might become a spotlight that would amplify her voice and her project's impact. Still, she couldn't sleep easily. Thoughts of the next day's presentation warred with the lingering sting of TSA harassment. She worried about how the media would portray her, a victim, a hero, or just clickbait. Regardless, by midnight, Ebony made a decision. She would use any attention that came her way to highlight her prosthetic project. If the world was watching, she might as well show them the difference she aimed to make. Early the next morning, Ebony dressed in her best outfit, a crisp white blouse, black slacks, and her one good pair of flats. Though her hands trembled with nerves, her eyes shone with determination. Professor Henderson met her in the hotel lobby, exuding calm authority in a navy blazer. "Ready?" she asked. Ebony inhaled deeply. "As ready as I'll ever be." They rode together to the Los Angeles Convention Center, home of the National Collegiate Innovators Expo. As their car wove through palm-lined streets, Ebony stared out the window, absorbing the city's energy. Her heart raced, not with fear now, but anticipation. Inside the sprawling expo hall, booths buzzed with activity. From drones and biotech to AI innovations, the room was alive with the future. Ebony's table was modest, but she set it up with precision, laying out her prosthetic prototypes and a laptop showcasing her design process. Soon, she was approached by a familiar face. "Found you," said Henry Clarkson, smiling as he arrived with two colleagues. Ebony meet Rebecca Lynn and Mark Forrester from the Clarkson Foundation. Ebony shook hands, trying to still her racing heart. "Henry's told us great things," Rebecca said, examining the prosthetic. "This is brilliant, especially for children in underserved areas." Mark added, "The modular approach could be a game changer. We'd love to learn more." Ebony explained how each piece was 3D printed and replaceable, affordable, biodegradable, and scalable. Professor Henderson soon joined the conversation, reinforcing Ebony's credibility and vision. Before leaving, Henry gave Ebony an encouraging nod. "Good luck. We'll be watching." As Ebony stepped onto the presentation stage, her heart thudded in her chest. She scanned the audience, professors, judges, students, and near the back, Professor Henderson smiling with quiet pride. "Good morning," she began, voice steady. "My name is Ebony Garner, and today I'm presenting a modular prosthetic hand designed to grow with the user." As she spoke, something shifted inside her. Confidence surged. She explained how the design reduced costs, used eco-friendly materials, and offered independence to children around the world. Her words were clear, her vision passionate. When she finished, applause filled the room. Judges asked detailed questions, which she answered with quiet authority. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. People leaned in, inspired not just by her work, but by her presence. Back at her booth, the momentum continued. Attendees asked about her background, goals, and future plans. Some recognized her from the viral airport video. Others came purely for the innovation. Either way, Ebony stayed focused, letting her invention speak louder than the noise surrounding it. Later that afternoon, she checked her phone. Dozens of messages poured in, interview requests, praise, support. One headline stood out: "Young innovator harassed at airport delivers stunning expo presentation." Ebony didn't smile out of spite, but out of purpose. She had taken her pain and turned it into power. As the day wound down, Professor Henderson appeared beside her. "You did it," she said. Ebony nodded, overwhelmed by it all, but ready for what came next. After her presentation, Ebony returned to her booth, still riding the wave of adrenaline. Attendees filtered in, offering praise, shaking her hand, and asking about the future of her prosthetic project. Some had seen her present, others had heard whispers about her and came curious. She answered questions with confidence, her earlier nervousness now transformed into pride. By mid-afternoon, Ebony finally paused to check her phone and froze. Dozens of messages lit up her screen. Mentions, tags, DMs. A tweet had gone viral. someone at LAX had recorded the entire altercation with TSA officers Perry and Harris. The caption read, "Young black student, harassed at LAX, she's just trying to attend a science expo." In the video, Perry and Harris could be seen rummaging through Ebony's bag as she stood by, visibly shaken. Voices in the background criticized their actions. Viewers had noticed the prosthetic parts, the conference badge, the unjust scrutiny. Comments poured in. "This is profiling, period. And why is TSA treating future scientists like criminals? She's a hero, they're a disgrace." Big names in tech had retweeted the clip, calling Ebony a rising star. Some asked for interviews. Others offered mentorships. Her name was now on everyone's radar, not just for what she'd invented, but for what she'd endured. Then came the breaking news headline, "TSA officers under investigation for racial profiling at LAX." Ebony's breath caught. The article referenced her by name, detailing the double screening she'd endured in Detroit and again at LAX. A TSA spokesperson claimed the agency did not condone such behavior and was launching a full internal review. Her phone buzzed again. It was her mother. "Ebony, baby, are you okay?" Her mum's voice cracked with emotion. "We saw the video. We're so proud but also furious." Ebony swallowed hard. "I'm okay, Mom. It was horrible, but people are standing up for me. The professor's handling the press, and my presentation went really well." "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so proud of you," her mum repeated tearfully. "They messed with the wrong girl. Karma's coming." Ebony smiled through the sting. "Yeah, it really is." When she hung up, she felt a new kind of power settle inside her. Not the power of revenge, but of purpose. She returned to her booth with renewed composure. More visitors came by, some referencing the video. But she stayed focused. She wasn't just a story, she was a solution. As the day wrapped, she learned she'd earned an honorable mention, not the grand prize, but more than enough to draw serious attention from foundations, universities, and investors. Outside the convention center, Professor Henderson stood beside her, both women watching the California sun dip below the horizon. "You did it," the professor said. Ebony nodded, overwhelmed. "I didn't let them stop me." "No," Henderson agreed, "you lit the sky instead." They smiled, and for the first time in days, Ebony felt not just seen, but unstoppable. As the sun set on that unforgettable day in Los Angeles, Ebony Garner stood triumphantly on the cusp of a new chapter, one she'd earned through courage, resilience, and a relentless pursuit of her dreams. The struggles she faced in airport security only amplified her voice on a national scale, proving that when injustice tries to silence you, the truth can speak louder than ever. But Ebony's story doesn't end here. This is only the start of a journey that promises to transform lives and challenge assumptions at every turn. So if you found inspiration in Ebony's determination, if her victory lit a spark in you, please hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs a boost of hope, and subscribe for more tales of triumph over adversity. Join us on this path toward a world where everyone can rise above limitations and shine.